Your good deeds, the kindness you offer, and the love and goodwill you send out will return to you manifold in various ways. Joseph Murphy. He is one of those difficult boss in every workplace. He does everything he wants just because he is related to the CEO. To save the silently enduring subordinates, I decided to stand up, but from the next day, I became the target of harassment. Hey, when do you go to quit? At your age, no one's going to hire you. Looks like a bleak future ahead. What? You'll become homeless if you get fired. When I defended my subordinate, she took a certain action. Her true identity is: my name is Ryan. I turned 43 this year. My job is neither good nor bad. I work in the HR department of a company and have been promoted to manager. Considering my age, it's a late promotion, but I find my job fulfilling and have no particular complaints. Except for one thing. My only problem is my boss, Alexander. He's a so-called figurehead manager who got in for connections. Arrogant and haughty, he doesn't do much work. He claims others' achievements as his own and blames his failures on his subordinates. As a manager, he should be handling a lot of responsibilities, including managing subordinates and complex tasks. But Alexander never does the troublesome tasks himself, always finding plausible reasons to dump them on someone else. Even during busy periods, he doesn't care. When there's trouble, he's the first to leave. Such a boss can't possibly earn the trust of his subordinates, and he's disliked by everyone. Once, a female employee in our department went on maternity leave, and due to the timing, we couldn't recruit new staff in time and had to hire a contract worker. Then, a young woman called Yvonne joined us. She was articulate, asked questions and took notes when she didn't understand something. When she had free time, she would actively help others, and we all talked about how great it was to have her. But the problem, as always, was Alexander. He who casually practiced sexism, dumped all the menial tasks on Yvonne. Making copies, serving tea, organizing supplies, tasks that weren't part of her contract. When I voiced my concerns, Alexander said, "Don't talk back to me. She should be grateful to be employed as a contract worker. Women are just meant to handle the menial tasks. Get back to work if you've understood." Yvonne shook her head and stopped me from arguing. "It's okay, I'm fine. I'll do my best in everything," she said with a smile, and indeed worked hard. I wondered how she could be so dedicated, and it seemed everyone else felt the same. One day, I happened to see female employees chatting in the break room. "Yvonne, I'm really sorry about our terrible boss, Alexander. If it gets too hard, feel free to take a break. Ryan understands these things well." "No, it's fine. Everyone is so kind to me. I enjoy working here. I see this as a challenge. Just because there's one unpleasant person doesn't mean I want to leave all the kind people here. I've even started to find fulfillment in my work." Seeing Yvonne laugh and strike a victory pose made me feel a bit ashamed. Honestly, I was so fed up with Alexander that I even thought about quitting the company, but seeing her, I felt motivated to persevere a little longer here. Making the workplace enjoyable for young people like Yvonne is also a duty of us older folks. I felt a bit more positive. Things were peaceful for a while, but one day, when I returned from an errand, I heard a familiar yelling. Alexander is on a rampage again. Entering the department, I realized Yvonne was the target this time. "How could you make such a mistake? Are you stupid? Just a contract worker after all. Can't you take responsibility for your work?" The usual character assassination. Listening further, it became clear that the mistake wasn't Yvonne's fault at all. It was clearly a result of Alexander's wrong instructions. The mistake was related to the job postings for new hires for the next fiscal year, which contained errors in the number of positions and the monthly salary. Though it was a minor error in just 2 places, it could lead to significant losses. To correct the already published job postings, we would have to request it all over again. Meaning, we'd have to pay double the fee, and even if we got a discount, it would be minimal. Moreover, we would have to re-explain to those who applied based on the initial job posting. Do you think we'd pay a new hire a monthly salary of $4,000 for 3 positions? What's that about? I said only 2. But the voice recorder clearly has you saying to recruit 3 people with a monthly salary of $4,000, Alexander. Yvonne stood her ground. She had been using a voice recorder as a precaution against Alexander, who often changed his statements. That's her smart move. I thought this would force Alexander to admit his mistake. But I was too optimistic. Voice recorder, are you kidding me? That doesn't erase your mistake. I do like this. Cunning woman. Alexander forcefully took the voice recorder from Yvonne and smashed it on the floor. Then, he continued to berate her with nonsensical insults. No one could stop him. Even though it was clear Alexander was at fault, he was hired through nepotism. Besides, he's closely related to President Anderson, so complaining about his tyranny would only lead to our own dismissal. All we could do was silently endure the storm and comfort our battered colleagues. In these times, finding a new job isn't easy, and everyone has their own reasons for working. Even if we wanted to defend someone, we couldn't. That's how it had always been. I've seen many subordinates and colleagues leave because they couldn't bear it anymore. But I had reached my limit. Seeing Yvonne biting her lip, looking down, holding back her tears, I was fed up with making her go through such pain. This is enough. You're the one at fault. It's your mistake. Do you think yelling and pushing the blame onto your subordinates solves everything? As a supervisor, you should naturally take responsibility for your subordinates' mistakes. I was ready to quit anyway. I didn't care if I got fired. But I wanted to help Yvonne, who had rekindled my joy in working, before I left. I stepped in between them, determined. Alexander, who had never been confronted before, was taken aback by my imposing stance. What you're doing is blatant gender discrimination, and as the HR manager, your oppressive attitude is shameful. Have some dignity. I said it. I finally said what I wanted to say. Let whatever happens, happen. Without flinching, I spoke my mind, and Alexander, looking for support, found everyone averting their eyes. Times like these reveal the lack of personal connections. Silently, Alexander grabbed his bag and stormed out with heavy footsteps. I'm sorry I couldn't defend you sooner, Yvonne. It wasn't your mistake. As I spoke to her, Yvonne, perhaps feeling relieved, began to cry softly. An older female employee quickly came over to console her. After some commotion in the department, I went around encouraging everyone to get back to work, and gradually, we all returned to our normal routines. As expected, the harassment began the next day. Important communications were not shared with me. I was informed of false meeting times, and then meetings were held without me, and important documents were shredded. It was so childish that I initially ignored it, but then it escalated to constant sarcastic remarks whenever he opened his mouth. Hey, Ryan, when do you quit? Where do you plan on reapplying? I doubt there's anywhere that would hire someone like you. You're 43, right? What are you going to do? Your future looks bleak. Going to become homeless if you get fired. He would nag and nag, whispering in my ear. If I didn't react, he would yell at me for ignoring him. It was truly persistent. He called my work cell phone frequently at night, and if I didn't call back, he would become furious. And when I did call back, he wouldn't answer. And he called me at times when people would normally be sleeping, showing his childishness. Then, he started piling on twice the amount of work, resulting in me having to work overtime until the early hours. every single day. The workload was so immense that I had to work on weekends just to keep up. I became chronically sleep-deprived and was constantly battling drowsiness. Then, one day, I finally made a mistake. Perhaps it was the drowsiness that impaired my ability to make sound judgments. I completely forgot the deadline for documents that needed to be settled, causing inconvenience to the other party. Alexander was thrilled to use this as an opportunity to criticize me publicly. And for that trivial mistake, I was demoted. I had been working with a bring-it-on attitude, but my spirit finally broke. Was there any reason to continue working hard in this company where such tyranny was allowed just because he was related to President Anderson? Even if I worked hard at the place I was demoted to, there was likely no chance of returning to the main office. It was just a matter of time. I convinced myself of this and resigned on my own terms. I felt a bit down, as if I had let Alexander win, but after a few days of good sleep, I started to feel indifferent. While doing some long overdue housework and watching TV, I heard the familiar name of the company I used to work for. Curious, I looked at the screen and saw the news that my former company had been acquired by a major corporation. I hadn't heard any rumors about it. I was honestly surprised. However, there was something even more surprising. For a moment, on the screen next to the acquiring company's president, Yvonne was sitting. It was just a moment, but I thought it was her. It could have been a mistake, but, well, it doesn't concern me anymore, and I went back to cleaning. One day, I received a call on my cell phone. It was from my former company. "Hello, is this Ryan?" "Yes, this is Ryan. How can I help you?" I had already completed all the paperwork for my resignation, so I wondered what they could possibly want now. "It's me, Yvonne. Have you found a new job yet?" "Yvonne. No, I was thinking of taking it easy for a while. Haven't started looking yet." "That's great," Yvonne exclaimed happily over the phone. "If it's okay with you, would you consider coming back?" Well, that's a tough decision, but why is Yvonne asking this? It was strange that a contract employee like her, and right after the company had been acquired, would call back an employee who had been forced out. When I asked her why, her answer was astonishing. Yvonne was the daughter of the president of the company that had acquired us. Though she was cherished since she was young, she had a strong sense of independence, so she disliked being seen as riding on her parents' coattails and chose to work at a company completely unaffected by her parents' influence. However, unbeknownst to her, her father had been advancing the acquisition, and she ended up working for her parents' company after all. After the acquisition, she became a regular employee, and since it had become her parents' company anyway, she decided to use her influence just this once and went directly to negotiate with her father, President Richardson. She expressed a desire to repay the favor to me and to work under me once again. "I've always wanted to handle things on my own. I couldn't help you when Alexander was harassing you because of me. I regret that. It might be too late, but would you work with me again? I appreciate the offer, but I'm disliked by Alexander. I might end up causing trouble for you again." When I declined, she chuckled on the phone. "Alexander, he's no longer with us. My father wanted to improve the company's atmosphere and quickly demoted him. Since Alexander hardly did any real work, his transition was swift and he was soon gone. Then, I might take you up on your offer. I'll be returning, but I'll work hard. Will you hire me again, Miss Yvonne, the president's daughter?" Yvonne, with a voice tinged with anger saying please, stop it, seemed slightly pleased. The rehiring process moved quickly, or rather, my resignation was as if it never happened, and the few days I was gone were considered paid leave. "Welcome back, Ryan. We've been waiting for you. We're sorry we couldn't do anything for you, even though you always protected us." Upon returning to the office, everyone welcomed me warmly, just like before. Yvonne also appeared from the crowd. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Yvonne, the president's daughter, but please continue to make good use of me as before. Laughter spilled from those around her as she energetically bowed. Thank you, Yvonne. Because of you, everyone can work comfortably. It's not because of me. It's your popularity, Ryan. I didn't mind being praised. I vowed to make the most of this opportunity and work even harder for the sake of my supportive subordinates. And there was another pleasant surprise. I was soon promoted to department manager. My daughter may cause some trouble, but I ask you a favor. Please don't indulge her, but train her well. There is pressure of president, but that's a separate matter. I have no intention of giving Yvonne special treatment. My only goal is to ensure that everyone can work happily. Your good deeds, the kindness you offer, and the love and goodwill you send out will indeed return to you manifold in various ways. Joseph Murphy. It was you after all, wasn't it? Are you working here as a janitor? While cleaning the company's bathroom, I ran into a middle school classmate. Were you able to attend high school? Surely, you didn't drop out, right? So, your highest level of education is high school graduate. That means a full-time position is out of reach for you, isn't it? She said with a snicker, to which I showed her my employee ID. No way, are you kidding? My name is Michael. I was just an ordinary kid, raised by a kind father and a gentle mother in a typical family. My father was reliable, but my mother had a laid-back and somewhat airy demeanor. Yet, to me, they were the best parents, and I was happy. That happiness crumbled when I was in the lower grades of elementary school. One day, my father passed away suddenly. Consequently, my mother, who had been a homemaker since getting married and was unfamiliar with working, had to find a job. Indeed, there was life insurance and assets left by my father, but we couldn't solely rely on that. It was meant to be saved for the future, for what may come. For at least the living expenses, my mother took on jobs as a housekeeper and did piecework, raising me single-handedly while tackling unfamiliar tasks. Still a child, there was not much I could do, but I tried to help out where I could, not wanting the household chores to be neglected. I could at least clean the bath or hang the laundry. A little dust in the room didn't seem like a big deal to me. However, my mother thought differently. She came from a background where it was not encouraged for women to have a professional skill. Attending a prestigious girls' school, she was brought up delicately without acquiring any practical skills. Unfamiliar with the world and having never worked a part-time job, my mother faced confusion and hardship following my father's premature death. If it were just her, returning to her parents' house could have been an option, but there was me, a growing boy. Raising a boy in his growing years was not something to be compromised on. Opening a job magazine for the first time, my mother started working in jobs she felt she could do, always appearing tired. I understand now, grown up, that it must have been difficult to support me on her salary alone. During major school events that required a significant sum of money, I saw her asking for financial help from her parents. Seeing my mother like that made me think. To avoid being fired and to quickly find a new job, it was essential to have a reliable skill set and vision. If you have the skills, you can work anywhere. And that qualification should not be something that anyone can easily acquire. It had to be a unique qualification, something only I could do, otherwise its value would diminish. I want a qualification that others can't easily follow. Even as a child, I could feel that. Thus, I spared no effort in what I could do as a child, setting concrete goals to acquire skills before entering society. Thinking such things as a primary school student, I realized I was an unusual child. But having seen my mother struggle without my father, I felt it was necessary, and I was determined. A child with a hungry spirit. Indeed interesting. My grandfather used to say that upon seeing me, watching over me with anticipation for my future. As a talented entrepreneur, he didn't mind supporting me, his grandson, as long as I showed my abilities, even though I was a child of his daughter, who had married out. I had been interested in AI and robots even before my father passed away. After my father's death, having a clear future goal, I spent my days studying hard to hold my own against college students and professionals. After graduating from middle school, instead of high school, I went to a technical college where I could learn and gain a lot of knowledge and skills. As I started winning awards in domestic contests and competitions, my grandfather promised minimal support for living expenses until graduation, so I wouldn't struggle. After graduating from technical college, I joined a small company. In a company that was engaged in the field I aspired to, I learned a lot. Surely, just graduating from technical college would have left me naive about the real world. If that were the case, starting a business would surely end in failure. First, I learned about the job content and working system of employees and part-timers at this company. I spent 3 years learning what to demand from employees, how to manage part-timers, and understanding the overall workflow before resigning. Then, with full preparation, I started my own company. Though it was a small company, I was fortunate to have good employees and managed to run it without any major problems for several years. The company has grown enough to increase the number of employees, but I still feel that I have a long way to go. For those with a skill in hand, every day is a day of study, everything is practice, and every minute and second is an opportunity for improvement. I wanted to grow more and always worked on the front lines, making it my motto. Never forget your beginner's spirit is the motto I live by. Today, too, I arrived at the office an hour before the start of the company. This has been my routine since I started the company, polishing the glass doors at the entrance and the floors, and cleaning the toilets to perfection. A clean company improves the atmosphere inside and allows us to start the day feeling good. Of course, everyone cleans their desks and personal items themselves, but cleaning the company's various places is a different story. Since I, the founder, am doing the cleaning, some employees have offered to take turns doing it. But I have declined their offers. This is my personal habit, and it's not something I want to impose on other employees. Jab, no smudges, sparkling clean. I nodded in satisfaction after looking at the toilet mirror. Next, I prepared to clean the floor of the toilet, diluting a solution of sodium hypochlorite in a bucket and soaking the mop in it. After the mop absorbed the diluted solution well, I wrung it out firmly and started polishing the floor. What? While I was scrubbing the floor, I noticed a shadow cast in front of me, indicating someone was standing there. Wondering who it could be, I followed the shadow slowly with my eyes and first saw feet wearing heels. A woman. Indeed, I was cleaning the women's toilet, but I had placed a cleaning in progress sign at the entrance. Could she not have waited? Thinking this, I raised my face further, and the woman standing with her arms crossed and a stern face was glaring at me. Who are you? That cold, disdainful gaze seemed familiar. Have we met before? Where could it be? As I traced my memories back to middle school, it suddenly hit me. Ah, that girl. Surely, her name was. During my middle school years, there was a girl who, for some reason, disliked me. Despite being in different classes for 3 years, she had been hostile towards me from our first encounter. From the moment we first met during a committee we were both part of, she glared at me, and that continued with ignoring and snide remarks until graduation. Even though we hardly ever saw each other, she would glare at me whenever we passed in the hallway. To this day, I still don't understand why she was hostile towards me. Since I was being ignored, I couldn't even question her about it and just went through my middle school years. Her name was Sarah. Sarah wasn't like that with everyone. From what I remember, she was kind and considerate to everyone but me. Her appearance was glamorous, not just among classmates, but also with upper and lower classmen. In short, she was popular across all grades. At that time, I was focused on my studies with an eye towards the future, making me a quiet and unnoticeable presence. The geeky creep. Thinking of further studies despite being poor. How presumptuous. The miserable one whose only merit is studying. She always mocked me when I was alone, taking advantage of those moments. Seeing the sleeve of my uniform frayed, Sarah would say, "Oh Michael, your uniform sleeve is frayed, and it looks like your shirt underneath is kind of dirty too." She pointed it out in front of everyone, pretending to be kind but actually making fun of me. I didn't care, but some of my classmates seemed to whisper about me. Not that anyone tried to isolate me on purpose, and after that I went on to a technical college, so I don't know what kind of high school student Sarah became. After so much time had passed, I never imagined we would reunite in this way. I wondered who it could be. Since parting ways in middle school, there she was now, looking down at me with disdain as I polished the floor. Those eyes, full of hostility that I had seen so many times before, were still directed straight at me. "It was you after all. It's been a while. What, are you employed here as a janitor?" Sarah didn't seem interested in my response, continuing with her assumptions. "Did you manage to go to high school? Surely you didn't drop out. So, your highest education is high school graduation, right? That means being a full-time employee is out of the question for you," she said, chuckling. Then, changing her expression, Sarah continued, "To think I was excited to transfer to this company, rumored to be the most dynamic at the moment, only to have my mood spoiled just by her presence. The worst." She spat out those words, glaring at me. I thought I lacked the ability to judge people. That's why, although I have set criteria for personnel recruitment, I always leave the final decision to the HR manager. A HR manager I trust. His judgment of people is accurate, and she must be excellent. But, thinking I should at least have glanced through the resumes of newly hired employees, I realized a consequence of my hands-off approach had come back to haunt me here. "What's the matter? Can't say anything back, can you? I wish you'd just disappear from my sight." Still continuing her tirade, I slowly straightened up, feigning ignorance. "This is my company." "What?" Sarah's eyes widened in shock at my words, face to face. "What did you say?" She couldn't believe what I had said. Repeating her question, I decided to explain more clearly. "I'm the founder of this company. Cleaning has been a passion of mine since the founding. It's not that I'm a janitor myself." "No, that's a lie." "It's not. This is to prove." Shaking her head in disbelief, Sarah looked at the employee badge I pulled out of my pocket. It bore the title Founder and CEO along with my photo. Certainly not a fake. No way. After staring at the employee badge as if trying to burn a hole through it, Sarah's face turned beet red. Biting her lips, now drawn with a bright shade of lipstick, as if about to break, Sarah glared at me silently before storming out of the bathroom. It's about time to start the workday. So, no apology. Considering her attitude, I sighed, wondering about her future conduct. I'd ask the HR manager later which department Sarah was assigned to, and then return to my original tasks. At the end of the workday, when I visited the HR manager, I learned that Sarah had submitted her resignation after completing her first day of work. At first, I thought it was merely harassment to trouble me. But Sarah did not show up for work the following day or any day after. While questioning her professionalism, I became concerned and asked the HR manager about Sarah's resume and interview, deciding to take action myself. Sarah intended to dedicate herself to this company. Yet, she submitted her resignation on the first day because it was my company, presumably. From the one-sided hostility in middle school to her actions now, I really couldn't fathom why she disliked me to such an extent. According to the HR manager, Sarah was truly excellent, and letting her go like this was not a desirable situation. Wishing to retain her if possible, I decided to confront her directly and headed to her family home as listed on her resume. I immediately took a taxi, provided the address, and set off for Sarah's house. Gazing out the window, I felt a sense of nostalgia. The scenery felt nostalgic. I pondered where I had seen this view before, searching my memory. But the first recollection that came to mind was from my middle school days. And then it hit me why the scenery felt so familiar. Yes, this was the road leading to my grandfather's mansion. By the time I realized I was on the road to my grandfather's house, I had arrived at the address I had given, in front of Sarah's family home. This is the place. The nameplate was written on it, and a single pine branch extended long and horizontally, allowing people to walk underneath it, a rare sight of a gate-covered pine in recent times. It's a gate-covered pine, a sight not commonly seen these days. In the back, there's a well-maintained garden, and a splendid house is visible. The surrounding houses had some changes but weren't much different from my memory, confirming my suspicion from inside the taxi. I sent a message to her mobile number, which I got from the HR manager. Thinking it would be rude to visit suddenly, I sent a message and waited for about 10 minutes. Then, I rang the intercom beside the gate. Well, perhaps the message had its effect. No sooner had I thought this than I heard footsteps running from the back, and Sarah burst through the gate with vigor. What do you want?" Her hair slightly disheveled, and forgetting her usual disdainful attitude, she seemed quite shaken. Seeing Sarah like this, I tilted my head slightly. "What do you mean? I just came to visit a relative." At my response, Sarah's eyes widened. I hadn't noticed just from the address given by the HR manager. But right in front of Sarah's house was my grandfather's house. Furthermore, Sarah's last name was my mother's maiden name, thus my grandfather's surname. It wasn't a particularly unusual surname, so I hadn't thought much of it until now, but putting together the house's location and a reaction, it was clear we were relatives. Given that we were classmates, Sarah and I must be cousins. "Did you know?" Sarah asked sullenly at my conclusion. I shook my head lightly. "No, I just realized now, coming here to visit," I answered honestly. My mother had married my father despite fierce opposition from her family, almost to the point of disownment. Given that my mother left the house under circumstances close to disownment, and my existence as her son, our relationship has been delicate, and I hardly ever visit my grandfather's house to this day. However, the fact that they supported me until I graduated from technical college suggests that they don't hate us. However, it seems the rest of the family felt differently, as we never met face to face. Sarah and I are related. The reason for her hostility towards me in middle school. If she hated me as a relative, her behavior back then makes sense. Now, you realize, that's just like you. Always doing what you want, not caring about how it affects others. Even if someone else suffers because of you, you wouldn't notice, because you're the poor, fatherless kid who thinks getting an award for studying makes you special. That's a joke. Sarah's voice, seemingly overwhelmed by emotion, grew louder. "Even though I worked just as hard, I had to get better grades than you, and the awards had to be bigger than yours to be recognized." After ranting in one go, Sarah let out a small sigh, seemingly exhausted. "Do you know there's someone who, no matter how hard they tried, was always compared to you and judged as inferior. Sarah's claim was something I couldn't comprehend, but it was undoubtedly her genuine feelings towards me. Even if it contained hatred or resentment, I was prepared to face the questions I had since middle school today. "That's enough, Sarah." Another person's voice cut in. Looking for the source of the voice, I saw a young man with a cane standing at the end of the garden. "You've said too much. Enough is enough." The young man, who seemed to bear a resemblance to Sarah, interjected. Unlike Sarah, he had a gentle expression and smiled at me. "It's been a while, though it seems you don't remember me." He appeared to be magnanimous, even towards someone like me who had no recollection of him. "Anyway, it's rude to talk here. Please come in. We can talk over tea." "Why?" "Considering the neighbors are watching, Sarah, lead him inside." Ignoring Sarah's discontent, he treated me as a guest, inviting me into the house. Sarah, looking displeased but unable to object, silently complied and led me to the parlor. A maid, presumably, was instructed to prepare tea, and I settled at the table. There, I learned about our past connections. The young man with the cane turned out to be Sarah's twin brother, Brandon. Apparently, when I visited my grandfather's house in the past, the three of us had played together. Having lost my father in elementary school and prioritizing life and future considerations, it seems I have completely forgotten about them. I sort of remember, but also don't. It's understandable you forgot, considering everything you've been through. Brandon forgave me with a laugh. But you know, Grandpa probably saw you as the ideal rival for us at our age. Everything was compared to you, which is why Sarah saw you as an adversary. I see. Grandpa always said that, being in a more privileged position than you, it was only natural for us to surpass you in achievements. Brandon shared, highlighting an extreme viewpoint. Moreover, our parents, aiming to be Grandpa's successors, made the situation worse by joining in on this. Brandon tried too hard to meet Grandpa's expectations, being diligent and responsible. Sarah. That day, exhausted in both mind and body, Brandon had an accident. He was hit by a car that came out of nowhere without looking at the signals. Sarah's words made me flinch. It was my fault for not paying attention and not managing my health properly. I'm lucky to be able to walk. Brandon said with a laugh, showing no self-pity. Sarah, sitting beside him, frowned more deeply. Sarah blamed Grandpa and resented him, but it seems she couldn't forgive you, who she felt was the reason we were pushed so hard. Every time Grandpa praised you and you acted modestly, it made them underestimate your achievements. We're twins and share a strong bond. After the accident, I was bedridden for a while, causing Sarah a lot of pain, and as a result, she took it out on you, who was unrelated. I wasn't taking it out on you. Sarah is just like this. I'm really sorry. Brandon said, and I nodded in relief, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders as long-held mysteries were resolved. On my way out, I told Sarah, I'll consider the past few days as a leave of absence, so please, I'd like you to come back to the company. I heard from the HR manager, there's a lot of expectation placed on you. With that laugh, Sarah huffed and turned away. But I didn't miss the slight relaxation at the corners of her mouth. Brandon also seemed to smile wryly at Sarah's childish behavior. Leaving the siblings' house, I called a taxi and reflected on my life up to this point. The emotions Sarah harbored towards me were, I believe, misplaced anger. However, her words about me just doing what I wanted and not caring if others were unhappy as long as I was fine stung like sharp thorns. I had learned the importance of having a skill from watching my mother struggle, diligently studying for a future. It was for the sake of living, looking ahead to the future. But if asked whether I never looked down on my more fortunate classmates, I couldn't definitively say number. I had been so focused on myself that I had buried the memories of relatives I spent time with in childhood deep within my memory. Grandpa might have understood my feelings well and deliberately clarified the superiority and inferiority among his grandchildren. Regardless of Grandpa's love for competition and contests, for the first time, I realized that I might have been hurting those around me unknowingly. The fact that I had delegated the entire recruitment process to the HR manager was also because I wasn't facing it myself. It's laughable that such a pathetic man is the CEO. Nonetheless, this unexpected reunion and the disappointment in myself turned out to be a good opportunity to reflect on myself. The motto I live by is never forget your initial resolve. It means, as you become accustomed to things, you tend to become complacent, but you should never forget your original intentions. Despite claiming it as my motto, perhaps the feelings I had when I decided how to live my life have faded. I'm glad to have reunited with Brandon and Sarah today, at this moment. And talking with Brandon reminded me of something. When I stayed at my grandfather's house, they came to visit in the middle of the night, and we lay down on the grass in the large garden, looking up at the night sky together. Despite being in the city, the stars were very visible that night, and the three of us got carried away with excitement. I don't remember what we talked about, but it was a very fun memory. It might be that we will never show innocent smiles like we did back then. Still, I smiled at the thought that it would be nice if the day when we can laugh together again returns.
In front of me, a flamboyantly dressed men and women are chatting cheerfully. My name is Jake Williams. I'm a 29-year-old working for a major real estate company in New York. I belong to the sales department. My job primarily involves selling apartments and negotiating building lease agreements with individuals and corporations. Jake, take care of this for me. I will take these documents to the client next week. So could you make them clearer? Contract documents keep piling up at my desk at work, and my email inbox is full of messages asking for favors. Overtime tonight again. At least it looks like I can catch the last train home with this amount of work. From an outsider's perspective, my situation might seem extremely unfair. However, I've resigned myself to accept these circumstances. Wow, what a big success you are. That's about all you're good for, unlike me, a Harvard-educated elite and a real asset to this company. While you're just a dead weight. The one who spitefully spoke to me as he piled more documents on my desk was my colleague, Steve Carter. Like me, he is in sales, but he often brags about being a Harvard-educated elite and heir to a fortune. True to his word, he graduated from Harvard. Moreover, he is exceptionally good among the young salespeople. Additionally, his family owns one of the company's major clients, a business almost as big as ours. The stack of documents Steve placed on my desk consisted of paperwork for finalized deals. As he ostentatiously flipped through them, I quietly said, "It's fine. If handling paperwork lets others focus on sales, it ultimately contributes to the company's overall revenue." "Oh, look at Mr. Nice Guy here. You always make excuses for yourself like that. Poor thing. Just go ahead. I'll handle this." "Thanks, man. I appreciate it, dead weight," he said sarcastically as he waved his hand and walked away. I sighed again. I actually don't want to do this. Yet, I'm too meek to change my situation. If I had to describe myself in one word, it would be socially awkward. I was the type who excelled in studies but not in social interactions. I maintained top grades, graduated from a prestigious school, and even attended the same university as Steve. Back then, being respected just for my academic achievements was enough. As long as I maintained my grades, I could hold a certain status, even without friends. However, being able to study well isn't enough in the professional world. I actually wanted to be an architect. I majored in architecture in college and was overjoyed when I landed a job at a major real estate firm, thinking my dream had come true. However, I was assigned to sales, far from architecture or project development. Whether the company never intended to hire me as an architect, or they thought gaining sales experience early in my career was better, I no longer know. Socially awkward, with hardly any friends and unable to make successful sales, my career prospects are bleak. I have a growing suspicion that there's no future for me at this company. Still, I can't bring myself to say I quit, remembering how happy my parents were when I got the job offer from this well-known company. It was Steve who first dumped clerical work on me. He saw me as a rival from the start since we graduated from the same university but different faculties. "If we're earning your salary by making deals, the least you can do is handle these tasks," he'd say. Unable to respond, I just accepted the menial tasks he pushed onto me. Seeing Steve dump work on me, other employees started to do the same. That's how my current situation came to be. Initially, I was saddled with nearly everyone's chores in the department, sometimes unable to go home at all. But I got used to it over time and learned some tricks. I even developed tools to make the work more efficient, and now I rarely miss the last train home. Even when I get home, all I do is check my phone or play video games, but still, it's hundreds of times better than not being able to go home at all. With a deep sigh, I set out to tackle the mountain of paperwork. I'm not sure how much time has passed. As I focused on my work, the world outside the window had turned completely dark. Today, though the volume of work was substantial, the tasks themselves were straightforward, so I'm likely to finish much sooner than I expected. Maybe I'll boot up a video game when I get home for the first time in a while. I really need to start playing some of the games I've been piling up. Though a few people are still scattered around the after-hours sales department office, they all dump their miscellaneous tasks on me. So their chatter is all about where are we going for drinks or family matters. I'm back. "And you did everything correctly, right?" "Yeah." Steve's annoying voice fills the office, heavy with awkward tension, as he returns from his sales appointments. Bluntly, I hand over the documents to him. He flips through them, obviously clicking his tongue. Hoping to find a mistake to exaggerate and torment me over, but failing to find any, he's visibly frustrated. I really wish I could talk back, but challenging Steve with my poor communication skills would only backfire. Silently enduring is my only option. "By the way, you're always free, right?" "There's a mixer tonight with graduates from a prestigious women's college. But one of the guys had to cancel because he's sick. It would look bad for me if we're short on men. You might as well come along." "Ah, no. I'm okay with drinking parties, but that kind isn't really my thing." "I'm not interested." "You don't have the right to refuse. Hurry up and get ready." With that, Steve grabs my arm, forcibly pulling me to my feet. Followed to the locker room as if under surveillance, I give up any thought of escaping. I'm disgusted with myself for not just refusing and fleeing. Truly, I am hopeless. With a heavy sigh in my heart, I quietly follow Steve. He brings us to a trendy bistro located on top of the high-rise building near the station. The place is popular for its good atmosphere and casual vibe, which doesn't require dressing up too much, even someone like me, who usually only visits fast food or pizza franchise restaurants, has heard good things about it. According to the waiter, the rest of the group has already arrived. At a table with a view of the night skyline, 3 women and 1 man who somewhat resembles Steve are engaging in light chatter as they wait. The man is probably an acquaintance of Steve's, though their exact relationship is unclear. He seems very outgoing, easily chatting up the women. The 3 women, all different from our faculties, appear to be Harvard graduates. 2 of them have dyed blonde, long, curly hair and are decked out head to toe in famous brands, giving off the vibe of trendy, fashionable women. I learn they work in advertising and as a flight attendant. However, the woman sitting closest to me, pushed to the edge of the table, catches my eye. Her bag is branded, but unlike the other 2, it's not from famous one. She's overweight, and her skin is so troubled that no amount of foundation or concealer could hide it. Steve glances at her disdainfully and then turns to speak to the woman sitting in the center. "Did you also make up the numbers?" "Exactly. We had another girl lined up, but she got a boyfriend, so we brought Madison, who's never been to a mixer. Thought it might cheer her up a bit. We're so kind, aren't we? Right?" The flashy women giggle together, their conversation seeming to mock Madison. It's unpleasant even just to watch. When I sit down, Madison and I make eye contact, and she tentatively starts talking to me. I'm Madison. Nice to meet you. I'm Jake. I work for ABC Real Estate. Ah, This building is also managed by your company, right? Yes, you're well informed. Yes. Sorry, I like architecture. The concept of this building, it's about harmony between water, people, and nature, right? Yes, it was supervised by a well-known designer. Oh, really? Actually, I'm a big fan of that designer and was eagerly waiting for this building to be completed. The first time I saw the beautifully arranged trees and the waterfall-like fountain at the entrance, I was moved, Madison shared. Yeah, the atrium also adds a lot of impact. It's got this strange charm, being so natural yet artificially crafted. I'd been a fan of that designer too, so I was excited from the planning stages. I really put my heart into it when I got involved in the sales of this building, I replied. This building was one of the rare projects where I was able to be proactive. Feeling inspired right from the planning stage, I naturally poured passion into the sales activities. Usually struggling at the bottom, my performance during that period surprised everyone as I climbed to the top ranks. Initially, our conversation was awkward, but as we delved into topics we were passionate about, we found ourselves smoothly engaged in conversation. After enjoying a pleasant talk for a while, I made up my mind to suggest something to Madison and started to speak. Excuse me. She started at almost the same time. Our voices overlapped, creating a moment of awkwardness tinged with embarrassment. Oh, sorry, please, Jake, you go ahead, Madison insisted. No, please, Madison, you first, I responded. We both ended up saying nearly the same thing at almost the same time again. It made us laugh, our timing syncing even in our amusement. I'll go first then. If it's okay with you, could we exchange phone numbers? She asked. Of course. Are you sure? I eagerly replied. Yes. I'd really like to have a detailed discussion about architecture with you, Jake, and maybe even visit museums and architectural sites. I usually go to these places with my dad, but I've been wanting to go with someone my own age, she explained. I'd love that. How about we go to a museum next time? There's a limited time exhibition on contemporary architecture happening right now. I suggested. Oh. I've been wanting to go there too. Definitely. Madison agreed. We both pulled out our phones and opened our messaging apps to add each other as contacts. We tried to scan the QR codes, but wasn't it possible to get to this screen from here? I wondered aloud. I thought so too. Madison seemed puzzled. Both of us struggled with the app. I usually only used for straightforward responses to messages from my mother like, "Are you eating well?" or "Are you coming home for Christmas?" It had been years since I had added a new contact. Madison seemed to be in the same boat. Only regularly communicating with a set group of family and friends, having forgotten how to add new contacts. Glancing sideways, I considered asking Steve and the others for help, but they seemed to have forgotten our presence. Deeply engrossed in their own cheerful conversation. It didn't seem right to interrupt them, and there was a risk of receiving some snide remark. Though I'm used to Steve's sarcasm, I didn't want Madison to feel uncomfortable, so we kept trying to figure it out together instead. Eventually, unable to find the right screen, we searched online and discovered that the feature had been moved to a completely different part of the app due to an update. It's hard to notice when they change it this much, I said. You'd easily miss it, right? We laughed together as we finally managed to add each other. Madison's profile icon was a monster character from a children's cartoon popular when I was young. Even the sticker she sent as a test message featured the same character. Feeling nostalgic, I decided to bring it up. Is that a cartoon character, right? I asked. Do you know it, Jake? Yes, it is. I've loved it since I was a kid and still collect the merchandise, she responded. I liked it too. Even now as an adult, if I see some toys, I can't help buying it. I live alone away from home now. But I have a collection of that merchandise displayed on my TV stand, I shared. They're really cute. Oh, by the way, what were you going to say earlier? She inquired. Oh, that thing I started to say earlier? I clarified. Yes. Well, I I was going to ask if we could exchange contact information too, so I guess my point is already covered. It's surprising we were about to say the same thing at the same time, I said, a bit embarrassed. Was that so? Yes. Embarrassed, I smiled shyly back. This was, after all, a mixer. While it's true that mixers are places to look for potential partners, I had forgotten all about that because I genuinely enjoy talking to Madison. It's funny how, when you deliberately take steps or make a conscious effort in relationships, it can make you feel unexpectedly shy. My relationship with Madison progressed smoothly after that. It felt like we hadn't just met, our tastes and interests were remarkably similar. We both preferred quiet, subdued places over noisy, flashy ones. Both of us loved architecture, and our tastes in cartoon characters and music were almost identical, which made it easy to recommend things we liked without any hesitation. Whether or not we saw each other as potential romantic partners was another matter, but at least the time I spent with Madison was very comfortable. And there was an unexpected benefit. Talking openly with Madison gradually eased my fear and apprehension towards others, and before I knew it, we had developed a good relationship. Since moving to New York for university and leaving my family behind, I realized I rarely made eye contact or talked with others. I didn't talk much with professors or fellow students about anything other than studies, and at work. I hardly ever engaged in non-work related conversations. In fact, even work conversations were kept to a bare minimum. Perhaps it was my naturally shy and introverted personality, but more than that, I had simply forgotten how to converse because I avoided it so much. Strangely, as I started to feel a bit more positive, the motivation to change my situation began to grow. Alright, I'm going to change jobs. What? Where did that come from? Madison blinked in surprise. I suddenly muttered to myself during a coffee date with Madison. It's understandable she would be shocked by such a sudden declaration. Taking a deep breath, I explained to a confused Madison why I felt this way. How I'd always wanted to be an architect since I was a child, how I thought I'd landed a dream job in the industry only to be placed in sales. How I wasn't good at dealing with people and had ended up failing in sales. There was a bit of embarrassment. I was afraid of disappointing her. But somehow, I felt that Madison would understand. True to my feelings, Madison listened quietly as I spoke. After I had finished, she clapped her hands lightly and said with a smile, I know of a small but reputable architectural firm. If you like, I can introduce you to them. I had no reason to decline Madison's offer. Later, I sent my resume to the architectural firm she recommended, and everything progressed smoothly to the interview stage. On the day of the interview, it was a one-on-one with the director. Nervously, I knocked on the door. A gentle male voice invited me in. It's been a while, Jake. What? I was initially confused by the kind voice, but I quickly recognized him. It was the warm gaze and the mole under his eye that looked like a tear, which seemed to express trouble. I remembered him by his trademark tortoiseshell glasses. Daniel. Yes, that's right. I'm Daniel Foster, Madison's father and the director of Foster Architectural Office. I suddenly remembered. This man was the local architect who had inspired me to pursue this career. My father was frequently transferred for work. Sometimes we moved every 6 months, sometimes we stayed as long as 2 years, but it was always to different places. Making friends only to soon say goodbye, and often being mistreated by other kids because I was always the new kid. I became quite phobic of interactions with others. The only family outside of my parents with whom I could ever open up was the architect's family. The kind architect Daniel and his wife. And their daughter, the girl my age I used to call by Maddie. I was particularly close Maddie. We used to mimic Daniel with the cartoon characters, colored pencils, and draw our ideal houses together. At the time, I was too young to realize it, but looking back, I think that might have been my first crush. Even after my father's job determined we had to move, I continued to correspond with Maddie. I wondered what words would make Maddie happy. Thinking it over, if I found the cartoon characters stationery or stickers, I would beg my mother to buy them for me to use in my letters to Maddie. However, after I moved again, and Maddie's family also moved, we eventually lost touch without realizing it. So, Maddie was actually Madison, huh? Yes. I recognized you from the photos Madison showed me instantly, but she hadn't noticed. It's funny, she didn't realize it at first. But you two started dating because you got along so well, I guess. Then, before I knew it, 10 years had passed. During that time, my name changed to Jake Foster. Yes, I married Madison and became an adopted son-in-law to take over the office. Originally holding an architect's license, I gained practical experience under Daniel's guidance and became a first-class architect. Before I knew it, I had become somewhat of a celebrity within the industry while being passionately involved in my work. I was living fulfilling days, doing what I loved as a job. Then, a former associate from the architectural firm I had belonged to contacted me. They wanted me to design and construct a large commercial building as part of the redevelopment of an area around a certain station. Today, the person in charge was supposed to come over to discuss the details and decide whether to formally accept the job, but... Ha! Jake? Long time no see, Steve. Ah, I see you're now the assistant manager. I was slightly taken aback by the appearance of the person in charge. The person in front of me was unexpectedly Steve. Steve seemed just as surprised to see me. However, professionally, Steve handed me his business card, which stated his position as assistant manager. I had thought with his track record he might have been at least a vice manager by now, so this was a bit surprising. My murmuring seemed to have hit a nerve with Steve. He frowned unpleasantly, his forehead, whiter than before, wrinkling up. You're just right for a small architecture office clerk like this, aren't you? Come on, hurry up and call Jake. I don't have time to deal with a loser like you. It's me, though. What? You've got an appointment with architect Jake Foster, right? I'm Jake Foster. What? You were Williams, weren't you? I took my wife's surname when we got married. I'm now a Foster. What? There's no woman who chooses a loser like you. I did choose him. I'm the one who chose him. Steve's face froze in shock as a beautiful woman suddenly joined the conversation. Her long, straight black hair. Elegant attire. Makeup that wasn't flashy but enhanced the quality of her features. Even without familial bias, she was indeed very beautiful. Madison, have you finished putting the kids to bed? Yes, they went to sleep easily today. I had just put them to bed and was about to take a break when I heard some disturbing conversation and came to see what was happening. Sorry for being noisy. It's okay, you can go rest in the back, Madison. No, I have something to say. Madison looked at Steve with a sharp gaze, as if pinning him down. Caught off guard, Steve flinched under her stare. It's been a long time, Steve. Have we met before? Don't you remember? I suppose not. You didn't seem to notice me at all. Steve appeared confused by Madison's words. With a sigh, Madison continued. There was a mixer you forcefully brought Jake to. I was there too. What? Why? I've heard about it. You got dumped harshly by both of them afterward, didn't you? You've heard about it? Yes, those two were my best friends during my college years. You mean, you were that plain, overweight girl back then? Steve asked with a tremor in his voice, to which Madison agreed. Steve, in disbelief, examined Madison from head to toe, as if trying to reconcile her current appearance with his memory. No, you're like a completely different person. No, it's really me. No mistake, Madison confirmed. But, the girl who was there at the time was really awful. Her hair was a mess, her skin was terrible, and her figure. She looked like she was just there to make the other two stand out, didn't she? Yes, that's right. At that time, I had become depressed following my mother's sudden death in a car accident. My skin flared up. And I gained weight. But fortunately, it meant I avoided the attention of someone like you. Plus, I got to reunite with my first love and even got married. What? Steve seemed wounded by Madison's words. He glared aggressively, but Madison did not flinch. Instead, Steve seemed intimidated by Madison's composure. After my mother died, I was really down. And my two friends thought that maybe a new encounter could cheer me up, so they invited me to that mixer. At that mixer, I coincidentally reunited with Jake, my childhood friend, and well, it turned out to be really good. But you openly mocked us, right? They were so disgusted by your shallowness that they dumped you, Madison recounted. At the mixer, the two flamboyant women with Madison had been her best friends from her student days. I felt bad at the time, thinking maybe they were mocking her by making her the butt of the joke. But in reality, they were trying to cheer her up after her mother's sudden death by pretending to be upbeat. They thought acting nonchalantly might make Madison feel more pressured. So they behaved that way under the guise of filling numbers, which unfortunately came across as disrespectful to Madison. Interestingly, the four excluding us were conversing separately at that time to avoid disturbing Madison and me as our conversation was getting lively. Of course, there was no malice in their actions, it was entirely misdirected consideration. As my relationship with Madison progressed and I was introduced to them, I learned of the misunderstanding and apologized for my previous misconceptions. They also realized how it might have looked from the outside and apologized, saying, "It did look like we were mocking Madison, didn't it?" After a series of apologies, we all ended up laughing about the misunderstanding. Madison had always spoken of them as her proud friends, and they truly were. Getting to know them, they turned out to be wonderful women, beautiful both inside and out. As we became closer, we discussed all sorts of things, including how we came to date. I simply explained that it was because we enjoyed talking and shared similar hobbies and personalities. But I also mentioned how I had discovered that the girl I used to draw the ideal house with the cartoon characters' colored pencils was actually Madison. We all laughed again at the chance reunion at a mixer we were both reluctant to attend. Since then, we have maintained a great relationship, family style, and despite their busy schedules. They often visit our home and dote on our children. One of them is getting married soon, and my child, who affectionately calls her big sister, is excited to be the ring bearer at the wedding. The other one had been secretly dating a friend of Steve's from the mixer, and Madison often receives gushing messages about their relationship. Interestingly, despite his frivolous demeanor, this man turned out to be a considerate and kind person, unlike Steve. In other words, Steve was the only true clown at that mixer. And still unaware of it, he continues to look down on others, beyond redemption. Well, even if we hadn't spoken up back then, they might have seen through you eventually. Those two have a terrifyingly good judgment of character. I mentioned. That's true. They are my proud friends, after all. So, what is this? Both of you teaming up for revenge? No, not at all. I just had something I wanted to say because you were still trying to belittle Jake. Madison stated boldly. Steve, unable to respond and looking frustrated, watched Madison. I decided it was time to move on to the main topic and prompt him to leave. Let's leave the past behind. Regarding the current job, I think we'll have to decline, so could you please leave? What? Is this some grudge against me? It's not a personal vendetta or anything childish like that. It's just that I don't think we can do our best work with you in charge, I explained. See, it is a personal grudge. It's not. I know how you work from having to do your paperwork. You always try to cut costs and make changes to specifications to save money. And you push these through quite forcefully using the company's name. Indeed, as a salesperson, maybe that's correct. But I don't think I can do my best work with that approach, so I'd prefer if you left. We'd both just be wasting our time otherwise. Realizing further argument was pointless, Steve quietly left. Ultimately, the commercial building development project he had intended to lead was handed over to a junior colleague of his. This colleague then approached my office with much better terms and a genuine passion for the work. It turns out this younger colleague was a fellow architecture enthusiast like Madison and me. He presented the project with such enthusiasm that exceeded the scope of typical business. Expressing admiration for my past work and insisting that this project needed my expertise. I liked his attitude and accepted the job. Conversations with him and the project team were always exhilarating, and before we knew it, we had created a piece of architectural romance. They went to great lengths to ensure my plans were approved and secured the necessary budget. Thus, we spent busy yet fulfilling days, and the project concluded with great success. Due to this project, the younger colleague was promoted, while Steve, edged out in the form his junior colleague took over. Found himself in an awkward position within the company. When I was at that company, Steve had been celebrated as a star of the sales department, but as times changed, His methods became less acceptable to clients. His sales performance is now average at best. He had been overtaken in both sales and promotions by his junior colleagues, and I heard he remains single despite some relationships, struggling to make the commitment to marriage. His once admired title of young ace of the sales department at a major company helped him in his younger days, but as he aged, his unappealing personality and declining looks gradually made him less attractive. Though the marriage market might still hold some potential for him, his high pride seems to prevent him from engaging in serious efforts to find a partner. His family's large enterprise officially chose his older brother as the successor. Originally, his father had intended to pass the mantle to his elder son, but Steve had tried to prove himself worthy by excelling at the company. However, as earlier mentioned, it ended with his brother taking over, leaving Steve without a place both in his company and family home, unable to create a haven called home for himself. While I do feel a bit sorry for him, well, he's now just someone I used to know. Comparing oneself with others, belittling others, taking the high ground are perhaps primal instincts of social animals, but acting solely on instinct is no different from a beast. Respecting others and being kind. While these may seem basic, people like Steve who cannot do so are certainly out there. Hopefully, they will eventually realize this on their own.